Hi guys, welcome to the Me, Myself and Mine podcast. Today's guest is Jess Fisher. She's a transformational life coach and an expert in mindfulness. She's been working in mental health and wellbeing for over 16 years and is part of a Christian team of life coaches at Rewire Life Coaching. In today's podcast, we're going to be discussing what mindfulness is and how we can apply it to our daily lives. I hope you guys enjoy the podcast. Hi Jess.
Hi Dan.
I hope that you're well, and I'd just like to start this podcast with just asking, how you've been and how this second lockdown has affected you.
Yeah, sure. So, as a family, we've been pretty well. So I live on the south coast with my husband and kids. We've been really fortunate throughout. I mean, I really feel a sense of solidarity for those around us who've really struggled, and I know that for the country at large, it's been really difficult and continues to be so. For me personally, I've had a dose of homeschooling, which was a bit unexpected, and obviously in the first lockdown and throughout the year, less contact with friends and family. We haven't gone very far, but for us, really, things have been just fine. And my husband and I are both in a position where we've been able to work throughout the year, which has been amazing. So for us, not a lot has majorly changed, and we're just keeping on, I think is the phrase at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's affected. We're all in the same situation, but everybody's slightly differently, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can you still see, your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with Rewire Life Coaching, and the work that we do is it's often online coaching anyway. We've done online coaching for a number of years. We do offer face-to-face as well. So there's been a little bit of change sometimes with face-to-face clients, but overall our work's been online. So the courses we run online are all running as normal, and our one-to-one coachings online as normal. So yeah, not a lot has really changed in terms of the work we do, which is great.
Yeah. Brilliant. So it's good to hear that you're still keeping busy and still able to continue with the work you're doing. So this podcast is going to be centered around mindfulness, and mindfulness is becoming a popular topic. It's being used in therapy. It's been used for thousands of years, and it's now being used in business, and almost everybody's heard of the word mindfulness. But can you explain to us, what does it actually mean?
Yeah, sure. So, there's many definitions of mindfulness. One of the most well-known definitions is one by John Kabat-Zinn, who's one of the founders of Western-based mindfulness. And I like this definition for a number of reasons. And he talks about mindfulness being a process of paying attention on purpose in the present moment and doing so non-judgmentally. And this definition uses the phrase on purpose. So we intentionally choose to step out of hurry and to notice what's actually going on in the present moment. So we're being very intentional, and that's a lot of what mindfulness can be about, really. We make a conscious choice to notice and to become aware. So for example, have you ever driven anywhere, and when you've arrived, you kind of get there and you're like, oh, I can't remember what route I took. I have no idea how I've arrived here. Do you know what I mean?
All the time.
All the time. And do you know what? We so do that. And what's been happening is you're just driving on autopilot, aren't you? You're going through the motions of driving, but actually your head's somewhere else. And we do that so much in life in general, actually. We go for a walk in a beautiful place, but actually our head is somewhere else. We're planning or worrying or problem solving. And we're not actually where we are. We're not in the moment, taking in the peace and the beauty that surrounds us. We're somewhere else, or we're worrying. So really, mindfulness offers us regular pause points in life, offers us the opportunity to step off autopilot long enough to breathe and to calm ourselves and to gain an understanding of what's going on. So we can ask ourselves the question, what's really happening right now in this moment? I'm in a beautiful place, having a beautiful walk. Why am I thinking about this right now? I want to be where I am. Because actually, we're only ever living in the present moment. It's physically impossible to be anywhere else. We can't live in the past. We can't live in the future. We can only be present. So whether we're sitting at a table with loved ones, prioritizing a heavy workload, or basically doing anything in life, mindfulness invites us towards a calmer and more aware, more present experience of life.
Yeah. And I like what you said there about, the whole thing about being present, and we can only be present. We
Yeah.
can't be in the future and we can't be in the past. And I think
Mm.
that's where a lot of us are thinking,
Yeah.
constant, even as we're doing this podcast, there's been, my mind has been from you, and then it's thought about what I've got to do after. And then
Yeah.
I thought, no, bring it back to this. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of us, we're so cerebral in the way we work. We're thinking all the time. So it's quite difficult to be present. But actually we are, like you say, we're only ever in the moment that we're in. We're not anywhere else. But our mind so often is somewhere else. So
Yeah.
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 Mm.
It's just one of those things I suppose you have to keep reminding yourself of.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So where does meditation fit into mindfulness? And is mindfulness and meditation a different thing?
Yeah, sure. So no, I mean, mindfulness is one of the intrinsic, meditation is one of the intrinsic parts of mindfulness. Basically, mindfulness is kind of made up of two key elements. One is meditation, or what we tend to call formal practice, and the other is something called mindful living, or informal practice.
Yeah.
So with meditation, that's where we take an opportunity to set time aside to focus our attention on something in particular, or to just simply sit and observe the moment that we're in. So we can just take a moment to breathe, to kind of just sit in the present,
Mhm.
recognizing what's happening. Maybe take some time to focus on our breath, just taking a couple of deep breaths.
Mhm.
And actually, as we do that, what's happening is our physical body is calming down. If you, I mean, interestingly, even if as you're sat there now, if you take a couple of deep breaths, you can physically feel that sense of calm coming over you. So meditation offers an opportunity to calm our bodies physically, but also to focus our mind on something particular. And that in itself gives mental rest to us, because we take our focus away from all the busy thoughts and all the planning and worrying, regretting and all of that. And we just take our mind to something as simple as the breath,
Mhm.
or many other things that you can meditate on. And you can, I think for our listeners, you can explore different ways to meditate,
Yeah.
using different meditation practices and styles. But yeah, so meditation is very much about the sitting practice, and that's why it's called the formal practice, because you intentionally take some time to meditate. Informal practice is this idea of living mindfully, living out mindfulness day to day, becoming more mindful in the moment. So
Mhm.
we're intentionally paying attention to that present moment, and we're asking ourselves that question: what's really going on right now? What's really happening in this moment?
Yeah.
And yeah, so meditation, both formal and informal practice, so meditation and mindful living, they're both great for our well-being, and they help reduce our stress over time. But what we also find is that the more we practice regular meditation, the more this permeates all areas of life. So becoming calmer, more insightful and more contented are
Yeah.
kind of like natural byproducts of meditation. So
Yeah. And definitely, I definitely say meditation and mindfulness has massively changed my life. Uh, it's made me become a lot more aware of things. It's helped me definitely calm things down.
yeah.
But I've always been a little bit confused as well. So, breathing techniques, say you focused on in for 4, hold for 7, out for 8, as a relaxation technique.
Yeah.
Would that still be classed as a meditation, or not?
Um, I think breathing techniques, I mean, obviously there's a plethora of different techniques out there that are used with anxiety management, with relaxation. Meditation is not a relaxation technique per se, but what we do find is that when we do meditate, often we get a sense of relaxation coming over us. And actually what there's a really great teacher called Surya Chitta, who's done a lot of work mentoring teachers and mindfulness teachers across the UK and abroad. And he talks about this idea of having a sense of calm and a sense of insight. So meditation often brings a sense of calm. So a breathing technique like a 1, 2, 3, hold, breathing out. We we often don't, it's not about controlling the breath when we're breathing or having a sense of, this is how we breathe. It's about joining what's actually already happening, taking our awareness to the natural process of breathing in and breathing out. And as we do so, calm will occur in our body physically, just like we experienced there. We just breathe in and we breathe out. And as we become more calm, and as our cortisol, which is our stress chemical, reduces, we tend to get more insight into the moment that we're in. We find ourselves able to be present in the moment. So I don't know if that helps to answer your question, but really meditation from a mind perspective, it's about joining what's already happening and becoming aware of that natural bodily sensation of breathing that we so often are completely unconscious of in the day-to-day.
So, I mean, I suppose what you're saying is that the breathing technique is more of a sense of control to induce the calm, whereas the meditation is just allowing what's happening to then also induce calm in the same sort of ways, but without the control.
Yes, I think to some extent. I mean, the word control is always an interesting one, isn't it? But I think the other thing about a relaxation technique is that there's an intention and a focus of this must calm me down. And actually meditation from a mindfulness perspective is a slightly different thing, because although calming down becomes often a healthy byproduct of meditating, we're just opening ourselves up often to sitting and joining what's going on. Because the problem sometimes with meditation from a mindfulness perspective is if you go in with a kind of a desire to calm, sometimes one of the first things that might come into your head is, well, I don't feel any calmer, what's going on, I'm meditating, it's not working. And then you end up in this thought cycle that can end up leading to stress. So we enter meditation in this, we don't really go with expectation, we just allow ourselves to sit and say, well, let's see what's happening right now, whatever's going on, it's okay. So we join what's happening. Does that make sense?
Oh no, definitely. And that's really sort of not changed, changed my perspective on it, and highlighted a few things there for me. But so I want to also touch on, what we spoke about earlier when I said our minds are constantly racing to the future and the past, because I feel like it's such a natural thing. In our fast-paced society, we're often living out the rat race, we're often stressed during our daily lives. Would you say that we aren't really living mindfully, and like, what are the processes in the brain that are occurring for us to keep jumping to the future, jumping to the past, and not actually being fully present?
Sure. So I mean, I think our default setting in society today is one of hurry, definitely, and also one of overthinking. So we're constantly on the go and our minds are full of thoughts. We're planning, we're worrying, we're looking to the future, thinking about the past. We might be comparing ourselves to others. And all of this is quite stressful, and that fast pace isn't actually very sustainable, and it certainly doesn't bring us joy or peace in our sense of being, which is so important to our well-being. So in fact, what we notice when we are functioning on autopilot and constantly hurried is that there are a number of physical things going on in our bodies that aren't good for our well-being. So, for example, we're in fight or flight response often, which is the body's natural response to perceived threats. So when we experience stress, we go into a fight or flight response. I'm sure you'll know all about that. But fight or flight triggers the production of adrenaline and cortisol, which are great stress chemicals that are really useful if you're in a crisis. So in the short term, these are helpful. If, for example, somebody collapses in front of you and you need to do CPR, you're going to want some adrenaline to help you navigate that situation well and function at your best spec. And what we know about these chemicals is in crisis, they're really good for those moments of survival. Of course, what we find in today's society is that many of us experience stress throughout the day. And so we end up in this permanent state of fight or flight, if you like, with kind of chronic low-level stress always in the background. And so this means that we constantly have that cortisol in our system, and this causes imbalances actually in our neurochemistry. So these imbalances include things like reducing things like serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine, all those feel-good endorphins that we want to help improve our mood and help us to feel good. they are reducing. So this leads to lower mood, potentially increased anxiety, and a plethora of other issues that relate to our health and well-being. So things like, people who have high level cortisol or are highly stressed all the time are more susceptible to ill health because their immune system isn't fighting at top spec, because we've got this cortisol in our system interfering. And there's it's a podcast in itself, but the effects of stress on health are really significant. So basically we want to reduce the cortisol in our system, and actually there are a number of studies that show that mindfulness can help to do this. Pascoe et al. In 2017 did a whole systematic review and meta-analysis on mindfulness and how it mediates the physical markers of stress, so how it impacts on that. So there's enough studies out there to do a whole meta-analysis, and that's a really good indication that mindfulness can help with stress. So yeah, I think in terms of the fast-paced society we live in, there's an awful lot going on that causes us stress. I mean, and of course social media is a massive thing that's a trigger point for us in today's society. And actually there's emerging studies that social media it can be as addictive as class A drugs like cocaine. And that's a real concern. But the thing is, many social media platforms are specifically designed to tap into our human reward system, which is our dopamine system, for those of you who kind of want to appreciate what that is a bit more. So in other words, what that means is that it's designed to create addictive behaviors. They're specifically designed to get us addicted, and it works. So we've seen a catastrophic rise in mental health rates since smartphones have been introduced, and there's a number of reasons for this. So firstly, we're addicted and we don't even know it half the time. I mean, just say to if we're sat in a restaurant eating with a friend and they pop off to the loo, what's the first thing you reach for?
Yeah, your phone. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah,
it's crazy, isn't it? Because it's such a subtle thing, but it's always there, and without being conscious of how much that could be, damaging, our relationships in life and everything else, and causing that addictive behaviour. Quite easily just keep going with it. One thing that I've started to do is, whenever I'm either doing work or whenever I'm out for a meal with friends or family or girlfriend, leave the phone in the car. And I've noticed that changes things massively.
Yeah, it really does. It's such a healthy choice to make, to do that. Actually, it's fundamental. I mean, and reducing your engagement with social media will help as well, because actually one of the problems with social media, and one of the reasons it's so addictive, is the fact that it taps into our human reward system. And so what happens is it impacts on the way our brain processes the feel-good chemical dopamine. And this means that over time, the things that we used to bring us joy and satisfaction, like a beautiful sunset or meeting friends for a meal, they don't produce the same reaction in our brain to dopamine anymore. So the things that used to bring us joy just don't. We're less fulfilled, we experience less joy, and feel a sense of numbing. I don't know if you've ever, kind of had a bad day, gone on social media, and then actually feel worse afterwards. I don't know if you've ever been in that situation.
Yeah, all the time. You end up comparing yourself. You end up thinking you're not enough, or you're not doing enough. You then others, and it just leaves you in this pretty negative space a lot of the time. And I'm not slating social media, because I use it for business. But I feel like if you're not aware, it can consume your life. And like what you were saying there, you become almost numb to things that are outside and real. I mean, I don't know whether this would be accurate, but our attention span isn't probably what it used to be, because we can just look on social media for 10 seconds and we've got all the information we need. Then we scroll, and then another scroll and another scroll. So we're constantly looking for new information, and our mind doesn't focus right anymore. And maybe that impacts then our stress levels. And then when we come to meditate, we find it even more challenging.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. Our attention span, I just read recently that our attention span is now less than the attention span of a goldfish. So a goldfish can hold its attention span for 9 seconds. Our attention span is now 8, the average person's attention span, which is really scary. And actually, one of the encouraging things to say about mindfulness is that mindfulness over time does increase your attention span because you're practicing focused attention. A lot of these skills that we're worried about now, like attention span, can be practiced, and we can increase our skill, because effectively what's happened is a lot of these technology things, they're just de-skilling us, but it doesn't mean we can't upskill again if we put in the time.
Yeah.
So that's one encouragement there.
That's a crazy thought, isn't it? A goldfish.
Yeah. Yeah,
All its brain is, and
exactly.
has less.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about awareness, and obviously the awareness of thoughts. Can you explain how mindfulness allows us to become more aware of these thoughts, our thought patterns, our emotions, and then also our behaviours in life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when we approach life more mindfully, we naturally become more aware of our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors, and how they interplay. And actually, one of the things, that another bit of damage that social media does, actually, which fits in with this idea, is it impacts on our emotional awareness quite significantly. So it what we tend to find is that we go to numbing out on social media instead of dealing with difficult emotions. When we're experiencing something challenging, we go, oh, we go to the kind of go-to comfort drug of social media and try and soothe ourselves by just scrolling through social media. But actually what we really need is to label our emotions and process those emotions so that we can actually move forward and step away from them. But what tends to happen is we numb out with social media, and then the emotions don't go away, we don't process them, they just kind of get stuck in our kind of mind somewhere with a whole load of other stuff.
Yeah.
So that's another challenge that we face in modern life. But the great thing is that mindfulness can help with our awareness of our thoughts. So what we find is that when we first start to meditate, we notice that our thoughts, there's just loads of them, that our minds are really busy. So we're overwhelmed by thoughts. In fact, what we know is that the average human has about 1,300 words or images passing through their mind any one time. So crazy amount, in any moment, in any minute, that is. So 1,300 words a minute, or images. So it's a crazy amount of stuff going on in each minute. So mindfulness helps us to change the relationship with our thoughts. So we start to learn to choose that we can engage with them in a different way. We learn to either notice thoughts and ignore them if they're not helpful to us, or maybe sometimes if thoughts are helpful, we think, oh, I'll give that some time, I am going to invest in that. But the point is that mindfulness helps us to learn to choose, and we can choose to realize that not all thoughts are true, are relevant, or are indeed based in reality. So yeah, one of the most helpful things that mindfulness can do is it can help us become aware of the interplay between thoughts, emotions, and actions, because there's a very strong interplay between those things. And a lot of the time our emotions and our thoughts are influencing our actions, and therefore our experience, for better or worse. So yeah, so I've got an example for you, actually. So say you've got a friend, and this friend is a really great, faithful friend who you text, they get back to you straight away, you never have any issues with that, they're always nice and quick at responding, and you just think, yeah, this person will get back to me nice and quickly. But one day, for some reason, they don't. So what kind of thoughts might go through your mind at that point, Dan?
Yeah, and I've definitely experienced this before. You jump to conclusions. You don't know whether your friend's ignoring you, whether you've done something wrong. There may have been an accident, and you start worrying. But then you also probably think, they could just be busy, and you've got these different thoughts going on at the same time. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so the thoughts that we have will significantly impact on the emotions we experience, and then the actions we might take. So if you tell yourself the story that that person's angry with you, or that they've got a problem, then what's going to happen is you might start worrying about your connection with them. You might start thinking, oh no, what's gone wrong here. You might get defensive or angry and think, what have I done? What's going on? You might even, get really stressed, lose sleep over it. And the result might be you ring your friend up and you're like, what's your problem? Or you might just distance yourself from them and think, oh, I think that friendship's over.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's an example of how your thoughts impact then on the emotions you experience, and then the anger, and then the action you subsequently take. So that's one story you might tell yourself. And as you rightly said, on the other side, you might tell yourself the story, they're probably just busy, they'll get back to me when they've got time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you tell yourself that story, then actually what's going to happen is you're going to be so much less stressed. You're going to be able to go about your day to day with no worries. And when they do get back to you, you won't have lost any sleep over it, really.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think often our experiences are really impacted on by the thoughts and the perceptions, or indeed the stories we tell ourselves. So a really helpful mindful question to ask ourselves is, what stories am I telling myself? What's the story I'm telling myself?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So
Yeah,
in that awareness to your own thought processes.
absolutely.
And is becoming aware of these thoughts and our daily actions going to have a positive impact on our mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it totally does. So so often we struggle with our emotions, and it's very difficult, and it does have a positive impact to build an awareness, but also that is only part of the journey, in the sense that what we also need, as well as awareness, is we need tools to help us learn to process our emotions and to change our relationship with our thoughts. So Viktor Frankl, who's an Austrian psychiatrist who was also a survivor of the Holocaust, he says this: between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response is our growth and our freedom.
Mm-hmm.
So the response to emotions that come up is really important, and in that space we get to choose. And mindfulness helps us to mind the gap between the stimulus we're experiencing and the response that we make, so that we can become more aware of of having a momentary pause, and how important that is. That's often the difference between stress and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, it's certainly helpful to be aware, but we also want to know what to do in that gap, what to do in that space between stimulus and response. So we need tools to help us to process our emotions.
Yeah. So processing that information. So
Yeah.
one person might have something come through that's the same as somebody else, but handle it completely different, because they think that then, well, they don't let it stress them, but their way of coping as good as somebody else,
Yeah.
maybe more reactive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we're all different. So we all do respond and react in different ways. There's a whole plethora of reasons for that. We all have different temperaments. We all have different ways of processing information. But one thing that's quite common actually in adults is that most of us do struggle to label our emotions. And maybe that's because we don't see them as they are, or we judging ourselves for having them. That's a common problem. Or we might avoid or minimize our emotions. And the thing about emotions is they're neither good nor bad. They're actually just information. They're a bit like a car warning light. They just tell us that something needs attention. So, when a light puts up in your car, you're like, oh, okay, the car needs something. What does it need? I need to fix it. And for us, that's what an emotion is. If you're experiencing anger, chances are you have an unmet need, and that need might be, somebody's overstepped the mark, somebody's overstepped a boundary here for me. So they're warning signals and they're information to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I liked what you said there about how adults don't really register the emotions that are coming up, and maybe we judge ourselves for having them. But human beings, we're having this experience. Of course, we're going to experience different levels of emotion. And I think that's one thing as well. I discussed it with somebody the other week. Our society is pushing towards this positive vibes only. Only feel positive. Oh no, you're being too negative, or but again, that's just suppressing how you feel. If you're feeling a negative emotion, then don't suppress it, but feel it, and understand why you're feeling it, rather than, oh, I must be positive, I must do this, because that's something that I was doing throughout the first lockdown, throughout part of
Mm,
this lockdown. Why am I not feeling like I used to? Why am I not
mm,
feeling motivated? Why am I not
mm.
Mr. Positive like I was? And then that I'm just criticizing myself and making myself feel worse.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And we often compare ourselves to others, don't we? And we, oh, how's someone else reacting? Oh, they look so much more resilient than I do. They're coping better than I am. And we sometimes have these, we place expectations on ourselves that we think society in general has of us, and that,
Yeah,
I mean, that's something called socially prescribed perfectionism, actually, and that's all about the need to be as good as the next person, comparing ourselves with others, and worrying about, you know, are we meeting the same standard as others in terms of our levels of resilience? Are we positive? Are we coping? But actually, you know, this thing about judging ourselves for emotions, it's very powerful, because when we judge ourselves, we don't allow ourselves to feel. And when we don't allow ourselves to feel, because experiencing emotions is all about recognizing unmet needs, and emotions there like a car warning light to tell us you have a need. And if you don't actually engage with that process, you're just an adult wandering around with a whole load of unmet needs.
hmm,
So a way of kind of a way of not judging yourself for your emotions is to start to use curiosity, use slightly different language. So when you're experiencing a particular emotion, or when you're feeling generally not great,
yeah,
you start to say to yourself, okay, this is interesting. I wonder what emotions I have. I wonder what this emotion is telling me today. Or maybe, what needs do I have that this emotion is pointing towards?
yeah,
So you just engage curiosity. Does that make sense?
yeah, definitely. De-
Mm.
Definitely. So, you know, what you're saying is that mindfulness is allowing us to, you know, almost become not only more aware, but then to have this space and also to be more kind, you know, rather than leading to these judgments.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when we're less judgmental of ourselves, and when we're kinder to ourselves, often, you know, we're more able to engage our rational mind, you know, because when we're in a stress response, fight or flight response, you know, if there's too much cortisol in our system all the time, that suppresses our dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that's responsible for problem solving and rational thought, is suppressed a little bit, because we're just overwhelmed and stressed. You know,
Yeah,
you'll probably have known what that's like. You know, if you're feeling stressed and people ask you questions, you're like, oh, I can't think, I can't think, I can't think. It's because your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is just offline a little bit.
yeah,
So by bringing ourselves this greater sense of calm, by processing our emotions well and reducing our cortisol, we're able to function out of our rational mind and out of our true self. And that's the best way to live, because we can have good relationships, we can be calmer and more, you know, healthier emotionally, really.
hmm, yeah.
So yeah. Mm.
So that was a fantastic podcast. But I'd just like to ask, are there any tips that you could leave the listeners or the viewers, you know, how to start becoming more aware and to start implementing mindfulness or meditation into their life?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, there's a shed load of things I could say, but I'll just start by saying, firstly, you know, if you want to try mindfulness, then start building it into your routine a little bit. So, you know, it takes 25% less energy to implement a new habit if you're building it into your routine. So it's really worth finding a time of day that works for you, and just scheduling it, even if it's a couple of minutes a day. Try meditation. You can go on, there's all kinds of apps out there, I'm sure people will be aware of them because it's very popular at the moment, but things like, there's the mindfulness app, the Headspace, Calm, Insight Timer, Breathe. There's another app called the 1 Minute Pause, which is a Christian app. There's also a website where you can subscribe. So the Mindfulness CIC get you to subscribe to free meditations. And also our website, www.rewirelifecoaching.com, has loads of meditations on there. Things, anything from awareness of breath practices to self-compassion practices to help increase that. So there's a lot of different things you can do to get yourself started. And then I think a number of other things, like becoming more aware of how you engage with thoughts. So asking yourself that question we've just talked about: what's the story I'm telling myself? If you ask yourself that question day to day, it'll be life transformational.
Yeah.
What's going on right now? What's really happening in this moment? What's the story I'm telling myself today?
Yeah.
So that can be helpful. And when you ask that question, then you're more able to say, do I want to engage with this? Is this something that I need to let go of? Is this even real? You know, and again, I mentioned him earlier, but Surya Chitta, one of my mentors, he uses this brilliant analogy of the thought bus. And it's the notion that when we go through life, we've got so many thoughts coming and going. And if we imagine ourselves standing at a bus stop, watching the thoughts pass by like buses, we then have a choice whether we choose to get on the bus. So another good question to ask yourself might be, do I want to get on that thought bus today? Do I want to get on the angry bus? Do I want to get on the worried bus?
Yeah.
So we choose whether we want to get on or not. And actually, when we first start mindfulness, what we tend to find is we're already on the bus down the road somewhere. We're already there. But the more we grow in awareness, the more we're able to notice and get off the bus, come back to the bus stop, and then make conscious choices to say, just not going to go there. That's not connected to reality. I don't need to think about that now. Or that's a future thing and I'm present and I want to be present. So that's another really helpful way of helping to manage and handle our thoughts.
And I suppose what you were saying there, you know, when you say about questioning the thought as it comes, you know, many of us have these repetitive thoughts and belief systems that are ingrained in us from childhood. And I suppose that question is going to challenge that belief system to then to get a different outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be oftentimes, obviously, again, this is another massive topic, you know, childhood beliefs and things, but actually often what happens is we do carry stuff with us along the way that makes us think in a certain way. So starting to question the reality of that is really good, you know. And actually mindfulness also just helps us notice in the first place, what are the beliefs I have? What are the things that I carry along with me? Is there any truth in that? Do I really think that unless I'm perfect, you know, I'm not worth anything, you know, because a lot of people believe that. And actually what we want to start to do is bring a bit more self-kindness to our experience by saying things like, you know, would I speak the way I've just spoken to myself? Would I speak to my friend that way? Or maybe what's the pace I'm demanding of myself right now? Would I demand that same pace of a loved one? So it's just bringing insight and bringing a greater sense of clarity to, I'm not being very kind to myself right now. I'm believing something that's just not true. So yeah, mindfulness is so helpful in making that possible for us, really helping us to build that awareness.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. So I've got a couple more things. Do you want me to share those or?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought then I didn't know whether you had any more.
Yeah, just a couple, but yeah, I mean, the list is endless. I could do a whole podcast just on this, but yeah, so other things that can be helpful would be making a conscious effort to be present in the moment, so making that choice. So oftentimes what we end up doing is we lean into the future a little bit. We're looking on to the next thing all the time, and actually we kind of rushing through the ordinary stuff of life to get to the next thing, like, you know, oh, I've got to get the washing up done so I can really live, or, you know, got to get this story time done with the kids so I can go and veg out and watch the telly. Actually what we're doing is we're rushing through the ordinary of life, waiting for the next thing, or living for the weekend and not enjoying the present moment that we're in, and we're wishing our lives away. So we don't want to do that. So start to notice, you know, when am I leaning into the next thing, and make a conscious choice to come back to the present. You know, when am I planning? Where is my head right now? I'm eating my dinner with my family. Why is my head over there somewhere? Just gently bringing your head back. And, you know, another thing that's really great that helps us stay present is practicing gratitude. So there's lots of research on the benefits of gratitude and how massively helpful it is to your well-being. So it increases dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and it also reduces our cortisol, all the things that we've been talking about already. These things will boost your mood, help you feel better, and reduce your stress, which is what we want to do. And Rosansky et al. In 2005 found that gratitude improves immunity, sleep, our relationships with others, resilience, and coping with stress. And actually what they found was that regularly practicing gratitude as a mindfulness practice, it increases our happiness by 25% in as little as 10 weeks. So 10 weeks of being grateful and you can increase your happiness by 25%. So really great stuff. So yeah, another helpful thing to do. And there's lots of other things that I could say, I'll just make a couple of book recommendations if you like. So there's a couple of good books out there at the moment, specifically oriented around stuff like this. So John Eldridge has written a book called Get Your Life Back, and it's everyday practices in a world gone mad. So it's a book about how to practice mindful living day to day. And there's another book called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer, which is about finding practices in life to become less hurried and less stressed. And then the Happy Buddha's written a book called, well, he's written a number of really excellent books, actually. I can't recommend them highly enough. One of them is called Happiness and How It Happens, Finding Contentment Through Meditation. So a number of good, great books out there to help you get started if you want to get on a mindfulness journey, I guess. But yeah.
They're fantastic tips, and that was a fantastic podcast, and I really think that there's going to be a lot of value in there for people that not only are practicing mindfulness anyway, like I learned a lot there myself, but also for people that were thinking about engaging in it,
Yeah.
or for those people that haven't heard about it, and you've just give out all that information. Yeah, thank you for coming on the podcast.
That's a pleasure.
People find you, if people want to get in contact, or
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Dan. So yeah, our website is www.rewirelifecoaching.com, or you can email me at j.fisher@rewirelifecoaching.com. But yeah, any queries, bring them through the website. We do mindfulness courses, so you can do an 8-week course with me online if you want to. And there's a lot of resources and meditations on the website as well. So as I say, www.rewirelifecoaching.com. Thanks.
brilliant. No, fantastic, and I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Thanks.
We've got that other podcast planned for the near future. Actually looking at how mindfulness or meditation affects anxiety, depression, and other mental health disorders. But yeah, so I look forward to that.
Thanks, Dan. It's great. Me too.
Fantastic.
Great. Thanks.